Hello and welcome to a kind of different video today. I've just finished reading When He Was Wicked and oh my goodness, I am so invested in this Michaela Michael drama and I kind of wanted to talk about that and about the book. Spoilers ahead obviously for anybody who doesn't want to know what happens in Francesca's story. Now before I get into it all, I gotta say that Franny and Michael's story is on par with Charlotte and George as one of my favorite in the Bridgerton universe. I don't remember being more giddy and happy reading a Regency romance before. I adored them. So in case you don't know, by the end of Bridgerton season 3, Lord Kilmartin and Francesca Bridgerton are married, but before they leave for his estate in Scotland, he introduces her to his cousin, Michaela, and Francesca has her little bisexual panic moment. Now, in the books, John's cousin, his name is Michael, is a man, and the show gender bent him and turned him into, obviously, the woman Michaela. The fandom was in an absolute shambles over this. Of course, she wasn't just going to be a lesbian, but she was a black lesbian as well, so there was a lot of racism on top of the homophobia in some of the more toxic corners of the fandom. Remember their collective meltdown when Duke Simon was announced as being black? Yeah, it was that all over again. I'll also say that there were some black fans who were thrilled at having a darker skinned lead, but were disappointed because she's going to be pining after a white woman. Anyway, the backlash was pretty intense, so much so that Gillian Quinn, the writer of the Bridgerton books, came out with a statement saying that she's fully on board with Michaela and that Bridgerton has always been about expressing and celebrating diversity, and she's sure that Jean Delan will do good by the characters and the fans. When I first saw that scene, as you probably know from my previous video if you watched it, I hated it because the timing was just off. Sure, they could have introduced Michaela to tease the next season, but the writers just couldn't help themselves and they had to have Francesca be visibly affected by her, and that bothered me. Now, having read the book, it made it seem like an even more baffling idea because Franny and John, while their marriage and their love, while he's alive, isn't the central plot of the book, they are a real love match and their marriage is very solid. Michael and Francesca are very good friends, and of course Michael has been secretly in love with Francesca since the beginning, but there's not even a hint of anything on Francesca's side. And why does the timing of her feelings matter? Well, this is a romance novel, sure, but it's also a story about loss and grieving. Michael and Francesca loved John dearly, and as they move on, and when they eventually do fall in love, they have to deal with their guilt over that already. Gillian Quinn was so patient with the way she wrote these characters finally coming together, so the payoff in the end is so worth it. I liked that Francesca was devoted to John, and Michael kept his distance. And in my opinion, the impact of his loss, it would have been a little bit different had she already started catching feelings for somebody else, and if she'd harbored that secret. I just didn't want that for her, or for John, or for Michael for that matter. I kind of wanted them to have their own clean slate, so I didn't want any overlap in that regard. There's this scene towards the end of the book where Franny wants to finally tell Michael that she's in love with him, but she says wait, and she goes to visit John's grave first, and she finally admits it out loud to him. Michael finds her there, and they finally declare their love to one another, and he pays his respect for John, and that's a really beautiful moment. So I think even before we get to the whole lesbian thing of it all, I think that Bridgerton started Franny's story off on the wrong foot with having her react that way to Michaela at the end of the season. So obviously we can't predict what's going to happen on the show, right? We don't know that Franny is going to have some kind of inner conflict over the cousins or if she'll emotionally cheat. Maybe this moment with Michaela is a fluke and she gets over any kind of uncertainty and she and John will go on to have a solid marriage, at least until John passes away and she reconnects with Michael/Michaela again. And then their storyline can start. But thinking back on the wedding kiss, this doesn't bode well. And the fact that Eloise is going to be living with them, I didn't have an issue with that at first on the show because the Kilmartin home is supposedly huge enough and there were so many other issues in season 3 that this was the least of my concerns. But Franny being away from her family and then needing them more when she goes through her fertility struggle is a pretty important part in the book. And I would hope that the TV show doesn't give us too much Eloise at the house like they did with the Lady Whistledown story, which actually took away from more time that could be spent with Pollen. By the way, after I read the Pollen book, I found myself rooting for them in the show even more, and the same happened with Francesca. I wasn't really feeling her and John on the show, but now I'm weirdly protective of this fictional marriage, having read the book. I'm ultimately glad that she and Michael found love, but I loved actually caring about John in the book, and they have kind of cheated us of some of that on the show. Now, onto the gender bending. I am not a big book purist when it comes to adaptations. I really enjoyed the movie version of Liet Kynes in Dune, and even though she can be pretty annoying, I love that they turned Gal from Foundation into Gale in the TV show. So why then did this Michaela thing kind of bother me? And is it even essential to Franny and Michael's pairing that he be a man? Well, kind of. Let's just say we do away with the storyline about him being in the army and him living abroad while Franny runs the estate. A very big plotline in the book is Francesca's fertility. Francesca suffered a miscarriage with John, and some years later, she's determined to find a husband and she desperately wants to be a mother. It's one of the reasons that she and Michael end up marrying in the first place. Well, on Francesca's part. Michael is in love with her. But they struggle as well, and while they are happy together, Francesca yearns to be a mother and she feels that void. I found it so deeply touching that at first, Michael just wanted to conceive with her because he knew that that would make her happy. He wanted to see her become a mother because that's what she wanted. And his heart breaks at not being able to give that to her. Over time, though, we see him go from feeling her pain for her to also feeling it for himself and for them. He finds himself wanting to be a father, especially when he spends time with the Bridgerton siblings' kids. And while Franny and Michael do eventually make peace with it, Francesca does end up falling pregnant. They have 2 children and they are blissfully happy as parents. So Franny wanting to be a mother with Michaela, it could work, sure. I mean, she'd face similar issues with not being able to conceive with the person she loves, or they could live perfectly fulfilling lives and not want to have children to begin with. You know, we could do away with that whole storyline. But at this point, we're straying pretty far from the books. And if season 3 has taught us anything, it's that the people running the show can't really be trusted when they make too many drastic changes. And personally, I read these kinds of romance novels, like Regency romance novels, because I enjoy strong male heroes. I never seek out lesbian love stories because, you know, that's not really my jam. However, there have been some really good ones on the shows that I have watched. I mean, Willow and Tara are one of the greatest couples in fiction, period. Rue and Jules, and how could I ever forget darling Ellie Chu and Asta from The Half of It? Ellie was so adorable, and that movie is really underrated, by the way. So I'm not opposed to lesbian storylines, but did they have to make this story the lesbian one? I guess in the end, my reasons for not wanting Michaela aren't really that compelling. I just wanted to see Michael and Francesca play out on screen because I just really loved that story as it was. Having said that, I will be tuning into season 4 with an open mind because even if it turns out to be really bad, that will never take away from my enjoyment of the book. And who knows, they might surprise us. Anyway, that's all I have to say about that. I guess I'll see you guys for another Bridgerton video in 2 years when season 4 comes out. That's an absurdly long time, by the way. Anyway, if you have any thoughts about this, how do you feel about it? Do you care? Are you into it? Do you hate it? Are you going to be tuning in anyway, or are you tuning out? Yeah, feel free to share your thoughts, and thank you for watching.